All right. There we go. So we're up and running. Apology for those who are listening at home. Yes, I do sound a little different than usual. It's not the microphone. It is because I'm still getting over a bit of a cold. So please bear with my different tone of voice and the occasional clearing of the throat.
It's you.
What's that?
They know it. Thou shalt know it's you.
They'll know it's me. So we are now in Parashat Naso, and Parashat Naso has a ton of amazing things in it, and we're going to focus on one that is a little bit unusual, and then we're going to do a special detour. So you'll have to be prepared for that. But I don't want to give too much of an introduction because we need to get our time used, because we're going to be reading more from the text than usual because we got more to cover. So we're going to be starting on chapter 6, which is page 799. This is chapter 6 of the book of Numbers. And dealing with a very special type of vow. Volunteer.
Me?
Yes, please.
I'm so looking forward to this.
Okay.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if anyone, man or woman, explicitly utters a Nazirite's vow to set himself apart for the Lord, he shall abstain from wine and any other intoxicants. He shall not drink vinegar of wine or of any other intoxicant, neither shall he drink anything in which grapes have been steeped, nor eat grapes fresh or dried. Throughout his term as a Nazirite, he may not eat anything that is obtained from the grapevine, even seeds or skin."
All right, so what are we talking about here? What would be the chapter heading?
Nazirite vows.
Nazirite vows, all right. The Nazir. All right, so the Nazir is a special type of vow, and mostly it is a limited duration vow. This is a special way that a person might try to draw closer to God, to connect to God, and there are special limits on their behavior that go along with them. This first paragraph told us what? What's the special limit for this first paragraph?
Avoid grapes.
Okay, so we've got grapes,
Wine.
no,
No
and
wine.
along with that, wine plus other drinks are also no, right? So no grapes, no grape peels, no grape seeds, nothing from the grapes,
No intoxicants.
Yes.
and no wine, and the plus is for other alcohols and intoxicants and other liquors, and not even vinegars derived from them, which may not be alcoholic, but are still derived from those same sources.
Or herbal intoxicants.
So,
Exactly, or herbal intoxicants, nothing.
so this is not a fun time because the rabbis have said that we have wine to celebrate our joy. So this ain't gonna be fun, is it?
Well, so being a Nazir is going to be more onerous than not being a Nazir. Whether or not it can be fun in the sense of fulfilling, of course. Whether or not it's fun in the sense of, are you really going to want to go to the frat party while you're a Nazir? No, that would not be your destination of choice. So it kind of depends on your definition of fun. But yes, wine usually does go along with celebration in moderation in Judaism. And the Nazir ain't getting any. Okay, next part.
Okay. Throughout the term of his vow as a Nazirite, no razor shall touch his head. It shall remain consecrated until the completion of his term as Nazirite of the Lord, the hair of his head being left to grow untrimmed.
All right, pause there. So what's our topic here? Our limit?
No haircuts.
Right, I'm just going to sum it up with the word razor because it's not just a haircut, but it's anywhere on the head, right? No shaving, no cutting, no trimming, nada. What's that? Oh, sorry. Thank you. And that is different, although for all Jewish men, most Jewish women don't actually have beards, but for all Jewish men, we don't use a razor to cut our beards. We are certainly allowed to trim our beards, and we are certainly allowed to trim our hair. I still need to. Whereas the Nazir is not. The Nazir is not allowed to even trim in the normal manner of a person. So this is a special prohibition. All three of these so far are things that normally would not be prohibited to the regular person. For the Nazir, they are prohibited. And there's nothing inherently wrong with doing any of these, as long as you're being careful with the razor kind of issue, as long as you're not trimming your beard in an inappropriate way. There's nothing wrong with these, but for the Nazir, they are prohibited.
How long is the term?
The term is up to the Nazirite. The Nazir sets the term for their Nazirut, for their Nazirite period.
Well, this still seems like what you do during a period of mourning. You don't cut your hair, you don't put toxins, so,
It's funny you should mention mourning.
oh, okay.
Keep reading.
Keep reading, okay. Throughout the term that he has set apart for the Lord, he shall not go in where there is a dead person. Even if his father or mother or his brother or sister should die, he must not defile himself for them, since hair set apart for his God is upon his head. Throughout his term as a Nazirite, he is consecrated to the Lord.
Okay, so when it comes to the dead, he's not allowed to go anywhere near them at all. Period. So if his mother, God forbid, were to die while he was a Nazir or she was a Nazir, I mean, the person was a Nazir, the child, they can't go to the funeral, they can't attend to the body, nothing. They can go to Shiva, but they're not allowed to be in the same vicinity or to attend to the needs of the body.
I am amazed.
Like a Kohen. In fact, more restrictive than a Kohen. For these particular categories, exactly, a Kohen can go. So, more restrictive in terms of their contact with the dead than for your average Kohen. The average Kohen can go for the immediate relatives, the Nazir cannot. They under no circumstances can they. Fairly severe, fairly difficult. So, sorry, go ahead.
A little light bulb went on when I read that last sentence, but I never noticed before, where I read, since hair set apart for his God is upon his head. Samson. Now Samson makes sense. I often wondered why cutting his hair would take away his strength. But it says here, if the hair, if she doesn't grow, is set apart for God, and then she cuts it off, now
And guess which Haftarah goes with this parasha?
I never made the connection.
Well, now you have. Good.
No, I
So
have.
you'll understand why the Haftarah was chosen to go with this parasha. So you learn something every day if you're not careful. Okay, just a little bit more, and then we're going to get to our main diversion.
Okay. If a person dies suddenly near him, defiling his consecrated hair, he shall shave his head on the day he becomes pure. He shall shave it on the 7th day.
All right, so you're in a house and you're having a nice time and talking with the family or friends, and all of a sudden someone keels over dead. Boom! They are now a radiant source of tumah, of ritual impurity, and that means the Nazir, through no fault of his own, has become ritually defiled, and the hair in particular is the symbol of that, and it's got to be shorn after that 7-day period.
On the 8th day, he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer one as a purification offering and the other as a burnt offering, and make expiation on his behalf for the guilt that he incurred through the corpse. That same day he shall reconsecrate his head and rededicate to the Lord his term as Nazirite, and he shall bring a lamb in its first year as a penalty offering. The previous period shall be void, since his consecrated hair was defiled.
Okay, so if you said I'm going to be a Nazirite for a year, and it's 9 months in when the person drops dead next to you, hair gets shorn after 7 days, you bring a sin offering, etc., and then you start the clock all over again.
This doesn't sound to me like God wants anybody to be a Nazir.
Well, it's not recommended as a permanent occupation,
Right.
And it's not even necessarily something that everybody should do.
Yeah.
But for those who are looking for a way to reach out, this was an option. This was an option. Except for one. For who was this not a choice? Samson. Which is why we're going to be looking at the Haftarah. Because Samson did not get to choose to be a Nazir. Samson was born a Nazir.
What goes into being born? What
That's
makings?
the Haftarah. That's what we're going to read. We're going to read about the foretelling of Samson's birth and why he was, or not why, but how he was determined to be dedicated as a Nazir from birth.
Has there been any cases of modern Nazir?
No, it is actually prohibited to become a Nazir in the modern time because we do not have the means to complete the vow and to bring an offering at the temple and such. So for someone to become a Nazir now would be the greatest act of stupidity because they can't complete their vow and also just outright prohibited.
Because it touches the Lord.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the Haftarah, page 813.
But I do see that the ritual of the Nazir, if he chooses it for himself, eventually ends up with him having to bring so many offerings to God, as if he's apologizing from having withdrawn himself.
So there is, and we're not going to focus on this as much because I wanted to focus on Samson, but we are going to, let me just mention that there is a school of thought that believes that the Nazir is punished for choosing to seek God in this higher, more restrictive way, as though the ways God had given us weren't good enough. It's like, what? What I was offering to you through Torah wasn't making you holy enough? You had to do this? Okay, fine. If you want to do it, you do this rather than something else, God forbid, that would be more self-destructive or horrible. But you're going to bring a penalty along with this.
And the time has to be limited.
And the time has to be limited.
You can't spend your life this way.
Except for Samson.
Okay.
Except Samson. Good old Shimshon. Okay, so page 813, this is Judges chapter 13. Verse 2 is where the Haftarah begins. And, all right, you want to keep reading so I don't have to fish for another reader?
Chapter 13, verse 3. Oh, yeah, there it is. There was a certain man from Zorah, of the stock of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren and had borne no children.
All right, so once upon a time in Jewish language, right, we're going to talk about there was this family, and guess what the situation was? Barren, right? Common motif throughout most of good Jewish storytelling is that you have this problem where you have people who are born no kid there. What tribe are they from? Dan, which is considered to be among the last of the tribes. It was at the end of the vanguard, or the end of the rear guard for our marching that we talked a little bit about last week. Dan was not considered to be the numero uno of the tribes. It was kind of an insignificant one. So that's important for understanding Samson's place in the overall tribal confederacy. Okay.
An angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "You are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or other intoxicant, or to eat anything impure, for you are going to conceive and bear a son. Let no razor touch his head, for the boy is to be a Nazirite to God from the womb on. He shall be the first to deliver Israel from the Philistines."
Okay. What a news, right? You're out walking one day, and all of a sudden, whoa, who showed up?
An angel.
An angel. Malach Adonai shows up. We're going to come back to that word a lot. So remember the word malach, which is the word that's usually translated as angel. And what's that? An angel of God, exactly, an angel of Adonai, and gives her the news. And what's the news? You're going to have a kid. And you're barren. You're barren, but it's okay, you're going to have a kid. And he will be a Nazirite. Well, yes, but what does that mean? Because he doesn't just say you will be a Nazirite. All right, so we have this prophecy. Now, do all Nazirs deliver Israel from the Philistines?
Oh,
No. Okay, so we've got this interesting little, and we're just going to shortcut it as Dr. Phil. The Philistines down here are going to be part of Samson's proclamation. But what does he tell her that will be similar?
Don't drink wine and intoxicants.
Louder, louder.
She can't drink wine.
Okay, so for her and Samson / mother, while she's pregnant, no wine or other
We
intoxicants.
tell pregnant women that now anyway.
We tell people that now too. Exactly, and that
Learned it from here.
Yeah.
and that would have been tricky, by the way. I don't know how much you know of ancient food and such, but in ancient times, when your water was unlikely to be very clean, one of the best ways to make sure your water didn't have things living in it that would make you horribly sick was to ferment it, was to allow the fermentation process to kill off the bad bacteria. So many people would have drunk most of their life very lightweight intoxicants. You would have had beer and wine for most of your drinks while you were going along. You wouldn't have just been drinking out of the river because that river had God knows what in it. So not having wine or other intoxicants is a bit of a difficulty. A bit of a difficulty. All right, what else? What else is she being told? Instructions?
No impurity.
Hair.
Food impure.
No razors, exactly. Anything else?
The food should not be impure.
An impure food.
Talking ritual purity or?
Well, the word that is used is impure, but that is the same term that's used for both ritual impurity with regards to defilement from a corpse, like this, but it's also the same word that's used for things that aren't kosher. You know, in Jewish law, we don't actually have the word kosher like we do now. In the Torah, it actually says pure or impure, and pig is impure for us. So that's a little bit of an unusual thing because it doesn't match the other laws of the Nazirite. And it would seem to be, well, if it's impure, like, you know, shrimp, then she shouldn't be eating it anyway. I mean, duh. But on the other hand, if it was something that was not ritually pure, then that would be acceptable to non-Kohanic families. And only the Kohanim would be particular about it. And so maybe what was being happened here was she was now going to have to eat food only in a state of ritual purity, which would also be rather difficult, but possible. So those are our two options. All right. If the story's already a little confusing, good. It means you're reading it carefully. Because I know we all get this wonderful cartoon version, if we've ever seen one of all, of Samson, that an angel appears to the mother, is this, you know, guy in glowing halo and wings, and says, "You will have a boy, and he will deliver them, and he must be a Nazirite, and don't eat anything bad, don't drink, and don't cut your hair," and then he flies off. It's a little bit more nuanced than that.
The woman went and told her husband, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God. Very frightening. I did not ask him where he was from, nor did he tell me his name. But he said to me, 'You are going to conceive and bear a son. Drink no wine or other intoxicant, and eat nothing impure, for the boy is to be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death.'"
Okay, so she goes off and tells her husband what?
"An angel came to me."
An angel? What is the first word that she uses?
Oh, a man of God.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
a man.
Isha Elohim. She says, what happened? There was an Isha Elohim. There was a man of God that came, and he appeared like an angel of God because he was so terrifying, so awesome in his appearance. So was it an angel or was it a guy? We don't have an answer yet. But she seems to be implying that it could have been one or the other. Huh. The narrator implied something. Now she's implying something else about her experience to her husband. How are we doing so far? So far, so good.
Now, the next paragraph that starts, I had not really understood, but now I get it. If a wife comes to her husband and said, "I just met a man out there in the fields, by the way, I'm going to be pregnant," you might say, "Honey, wait a minute."
Indeed, and there is a school of thought among the commentators that actually points out that another reason why this particular part of Samson's life was used as the Haftarah rather than some of his more dramatic deeds later in life was because it shows the reconciliation between husband and wife that is similar to the reconciliation that comes from Sota, the ritual of the bitter waters, where a woman who is suspected of adultery can be dragged before the priests by her husband and forced to drink a concoction to see whether or not she really was unfaithful or not. So this may have also been chosen because we have here a case where the husband could have been suspicious and jealous of his wife in a very mean and horrid way. But as we're going to see, he doesn't take quite that same tact. Going to criticize perhaps what his response is, but it's not to be jealous and beat her and say that you're, you know, adulterous wretch and you must have been sleeping with someone and da 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 da. So let's see also what did she then say? What are the rules according to Mrs. Manoah? What are the rules that were given?
Wine.
Okay, so we get the wine times 2
And the
again.
impure food.
What's that?
eat nothing impure.
Okay, we get the impure food is repeated by her.
She didn't repeat the part about not cutting his hair.
Yeah, there's no mention of the hair again when she talks to him. And as before, there's still no mention about the dead and still no mention about the grapes. So her repetition is a little bit shorter than what the angel actually told her. What else is missing from her repetition of what the angel told her? You may need to flip your eyes back up.
About delivering from the Philistines.
No mention of the Philistines. Thank you. And
The baby will be a Nazirite.
they both use the term Nazirite. We'll just use that up here. That is used in both throughout. But there's something else missing. So we already got that she doesn't repeat to her husband that her son will deliver them from the Philistines. But what else?
She doesn't repeat that the angel said she was barren.
And she doesn't repeat that the angel said she was barren. Right? She doesn't say, an angel appeared to me and said, you're barren, but don't worry, you'll have a son. Remember, it said in the narration that she was barren. We don't know what the family knew. It wasn't like they had fertility clinics back then that you could go to and get tested. So we'll come back to that. But again, sharpen your reading skills. Differences in text, especially texts that presume to be a repetition of something earlier, any differences between the two matter. And we need to explain them. Sometimes the explanation can be simple. We're going to see a few options for that. But sometimes the explanations can be very meaningful. So, all right, so that's her response. We could have had angry husband of, what do you mean you met some guy in the field and now you're going to have a boy? But instead we get a slightly different version.
So Manoah pleaded with the Lord. Oh, my Lord, he said, please let the man of God that you sent come to us again, and let him instruct us how to act with the child that is to be born. And God heeded Manoah's plea, and the angel of God came to the woman again. She was sitting in the field, and her husband Manoah was not with her.
Okay, so his response is, God, could we get a do-over? I'm sorry I missed it. So if there really was an Isha Elohim, if there really was this man of God, he doesn't add that really was, but I'm sort of projecting as a husband might, could he come again so that I can hear directly? This might be a test. This might be I don't trust her. Might be I don't trust her to have repeated everything carefully enough to me. Maybe there were stipulations in how he was to be raised and what was supposed to be going on, because obviously this is something special that she didn't repeat correctly, and I want to make sure that we do the right thing. So it could...
Or maybe she's gone crazy. You come home and say, an angel came to me.
Or maybe she's just a little...
She's
Right.
off.
Okay, remember, she has not used the term angel specifically. It was Isha Elohim first, and then like an angel of God. So it's a little fungible still, little flexible. All right, and then what happens?
Man.
Comes back when?
And she's alone.
When she's alone again.
But it says God came to the
Okay, so well, it's the
The angel of God.
it flips on the page. It is Malacha Elohim in the Hebrew, but the way the page paragraph breaks, it looks like it just says God. So this Malach comes back, and she's alone again, which is like, gee, thanks. Now my husband's really going to believe me, because I've met a second time in seclusion with you, which, by the way, is the benchmark in Sota for when the ritual gets triggered, is for meeting with a man twice in privacy that the husband told you not to be with. At first he warned you and then did it again. Anyway, that's a whole other argument, but we then have her have to do what? Keep reading.
Well, then she went and said to her husband, she ran in haste to tell her husband, and then the man who came to me has just appeared to me. Manoah promptly followed his wife. He came to the man and asked him, are you the man who spoke to my wife? Yes, he answered. Then Manoah said, may your words soon come true. What rules shall be observed for the boy? The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, the woman must abstain from all things against which I warned her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, or drink wine, or other intoxicant, or eat anything impure. She must observe all that I commanded her.
Okay. So angel gives a repetition, and it is an accurate repetition of what Mrs. Manoach said. It's not 100% verbatim repetition of what the angel said the first time. We got the distinction right. He doesn't mention the Baroness, doesn't mention the Philistines,
Doesn't mention the razor.
doesn't mention the razor, just has to do what your wife already told you. So the wife gets 100% confirmation, and Manoach doesn't get anything that makes him think his wife was giving him a slightly flawed account of the event. Very good. Onward.
Manoach said to the angel of the Lord, "Let us detain you and prepare a kid for you." But the angel of the Lord said,
Remember, we're talking kid as in baby goat. We're not talking child.
Oh, right.
Could you wait 9 months just to see if the kid looks like you?
But the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "If you detain me, I shall not eat your food. And if you present a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." For Manoah did not know that he was an angel of the Lord.
All right, so a little bit of narration filling in our confusion. We've been going back and forth calling this person an Ish and an Isha Elohim and a Malacha Elohim within the words of Manoach and his wife. And what did he not know? He didn't know that this was a Malach Adonai. And apparently there's some confusion of that. And so when he was offering that the guy would stay with him a while, have a food and all of that, apparently Manoach was making some mistakes. Yes?
But isn't this what Abraham did when the angels came to his tent? He wanted to make a meal for them also?
He did want to make a meal for them, and they even seemed to stay, and
Even seemed to.
and they ran off, not they, but the servants ran off and prepared things.
So this would be the right thing to do when a stranger comes to you. To
Especially a stranger that's brought you such wonderful news. Especially a stranger that's brought such wonderful news. But if it's an angel, then the angel is apparently not going to eat. And what about the sacrifice? What's the response?
Instead of feeding it to me.
To God.
Yeah, I didn't do anything. God is doing this, not me. So you don't offer a sacrifice to an angel, you would offer the sacrifice to God. And I don't have to stick around for that. Make sense? Maybe? Onward.
So Manoach said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name? We should like to honor you when your words come true." The angel said to him, "You must not ask for my name. It is unknowable."
All right, so Manoach is a little slow in the uptake, right? We've just been told he wasn't quite sure what his wife said, and so he asked for a repetition, and he got just the exact same as she said, so she was right. And he doesn't seem to catch on that this is, in fact, a malach, and we'll come back to what that means in a bit. And even when it's been made clear, don't offer it to me, offer it to God, that's where your honor should be directed, it's still, so what's your name? Maybe we can name the boy after you. And it's like, no, you don't get it. You don't get it. And don't worry, Manoach is still not going to get it even by the end. So keep going.
So Manoach took the kid and the grain offering and offered them up on the rock to the Lord. And a marvelous thing happened while Manoach and his wife looked on. As the flames leaped up from the altar toward the sky, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flames of the altar, while Manoach and his wife looked on. And they flung themselves on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord never appeared again to Manoach and his wife. Manoach then realized that it had been an angel of the Lord. And Manoach said to his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen a divine being."
All right, so his last gasp of relevancy, which is just revealing his ignorance. Oh no, it really was an angel. That means we're going to die. What's the answer to that? Those of you who haven't been reading ahead.
And we couldn't have the child.
Then there wouldn't be a baby. How can you be worried that we're going to die if we've just had a prophecy that we're going to have a kid? Because if we die, the prophecy would be wrong. And then it would kind of not be a divine prophecy. So, yeah, poor Manoach is a little slow.
Well, he may not be slow because he really wants to make sure that he's gotten the truth, because his wife has just come and told him this really weird thing they're going to have a baby. So he's asking further question, as a good lawyer would.
Yes, I don't quite get the feeling that Manoach would have been a lawyer, but yes, as a good person would, he does want to double check and be
Double-checking
careful.
everything.
Absolutely.
Let me get this straight.
Yeah, let me get this straight. Just one more thing.
Well, so that you
But-
would say to him, "What do you mean? You didn't even ask him like, this, that, or the other? You know, you just took it for his brand. He said he's an angel, so you believed him? What are you, an idiot?"
But in fairness,
I could see that.
the angel didn't introduce himself as an angel.
No.
True, and it does seem that it was easy to mistake him for just a guy. Because we do have, throughout this whole thing, we do have, well, 4 different titles. Right? We have that he is an Ish, the person who comes, he is a man. We have that he was an Isha Elohim, which means that he was a man of God. And we have that he was a Malach Elohim, that he was an angel of God. And we have that he was a Malach Adonai, that he was an angel of Adonai. Although Malach Adonai is never uttered by Manoach and his wife. That's only by the narrator. They only refer to him as a Malach of Elohim. I think.
Throughout, the reference is made to other options, to an angel that we know defined as being an angel,
Mm-hmm.
but has the appearance of man.
Correct.
So it would be simple.
It seems like it's possible to make that mistake, because after all, when the 2 angels went down to Sodom and Gomorrah, we can assume that, at least out of self-preservation, the Sodomites would not have come attacking them if they had recognized them as divine beings. That even the people of Sodom were not that stupid and crazy, but if they looked like regular humans, then they could be expected to make that mistake. So it's not impossible or even unprecedented in Tanakh for angels and people to look very, very similar to one another, depending upon the circumstances. So we can perhaps understand. Although the big fiery thing, that would have been a bit of a tip-off.
If this was an ordinary man,
Yes.
not terribly educated.
Indeed,
not
the rabbis
terribly
considered him to be a complete
I mean,
ignoramus, yes.
What should he have accepted on faith? When
Right.
he had no training, he didn't know what was an angel and what was a man or anything else.
So indeed, the rabbis describe Manoach as being an Am Haaretz, which means a completely uneducated person, a peasant in the most insulting of ways. Not a a hardworking farmer, salt of the earth, and faithful and learned peasant, which is perfectly common within Jewish tradition, but a stupid, wouldn't know the Torah if it came up and bid him kind of peasant. And I think I can see from the text why the rabbis would have felt, because the rabbis would have, if an angel had appeared to them, they would have asked different questions, and they would have responded in a more insightful way. They would have been saying, well, wait a minute, when you say don't eat impure foods, what do you mean? And when you say no razor, and is there anything else, and what about on this day, what about this circumstance, there would have been more of a conversation to get all the fine-tuning. Whereas this guy is at first incredulous, and then he's falling on his face. It's just complete extremes with no ability to be balanced in the situation. And you're right that that's a perfectly natural response, but it's not one that we like to see from a hero. It's not,
But he's not a hero.
but he's not a hero.
That's the point.
And we're going to have to wrestle with that legacy when it comes to his son. And we're going to have to answer the question of whether or not Samson was a hero. But we got a few more paragraphs to go before we can get to our commentary, and then...
Not to belabor the point, but really, he appears before Manoach as a man. I mean, if I see you standing in front of me, I'm not going to assume you're an angel. You have no wings, you have no halo. Why should I think you're an angel if you just act like one until I set up some fire, and if you then rise up in the smoke?
But remember, his wife was able to see that he was like an angel,
Yes, I guess.
that he had the appearance of an angel. She did call him an Isha Elohim, a man of God, whereas he just calls him an Ish.
Okay.
Are you the guy that talked to my wife? Is how he meets the being in the first sentence out of Manoach's mouth to him. Are you the man that talked to my wife? So his wife was able to perceive something that he couldn't.
Women are more perceptive anyway.
And moving on from that note,
Okay, so when Manoach says we're going to die because we saw a divine being,
his wife
but his
responds,
wife said to him,
as we said, she is more perceptive.
had the Lord meant to take our lives, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain offering from us, nor let us see all these things, and he would not have made such an announcement to us.
And if God wanted to kill us, he would have killed us. And he wouldn't have told us all this stuff. And the sacrifice would not have been accepted. Come on.
The woman bore a son, and she named him Samson. The boy grew up, and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord first moved him in the encampment of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol.
Okay. Samson. Hero? Not hero? Favorite of Hollywood. Samson and Delilah is a great movie motif. What did Samson do? What was his heroism? Even if he was or wasn't a hero, we can debate. But what was his heroism?
Like pulling down the walls of where they had.
So
climbed him up.
he has
And killing
a
him.
suicidal victory at the end after they have done the whole clipping of his hair and chaining him and blinding him. He after his hair grows back, he pulls down the walls of the temple and kills all the people that are in it. But before that, he did stuff too. That wasn't his only act in his life.
Yeah, he tore the gates off a city.
He tore the gates off a city over a woman, and he went out and murdered many other people over a woman. He had relations, to be as diplomatic to him as possible, with 3 different Philistine women, and all 3 of them caused pain, suffering, and bloodshed, ultimately to himself, but also to a lot of Philistines. So he was a man of passion, a man of immense physical strength, and someone that made his mark in the world by killing. By killing. What is a Nazir not allowed to do? Be in the presence of the dead. He can't go to his mother's own funeral, but apparently he thinks it's okay to litter the field around him with the dead as he smashes them with the jawbone of a donkey. That's one of the famous scenes of Samson, is using the jawbone of a donkey as a club. That's rather unusual, because what should have happened after he was surrounded by the corpse? What?
You have to sacrifice and start all over.
You have to sacrifice and start all over again and shave the head. Right? His hair, after every battle, he should have been shaving himself down to the stubble. If he was acting as a true Nazir. If he was acting appropriately as a Nazir should. A Nazir who, for whatever reason, was forced to go to battle and who was forced to then be there and kill people with his bare hands and weapons attached to him, would have been ritually defiled, made impure, and have to shave their head. We don't get any record of that. Because what happens when his head does get shaved? He loses his strength. He loses his strength. So it would have probably been pointed out that after every battle, he lost his strength until his hair grew back in after he shaved it because he was being a proper Nazir. But he wasn't. So he is a very cloudy figure, a very murky figure, and his birth foretelling is very murky as well. So let's see what we can pull out of this. All right, we've only got 20 minutes left because reading the Haftarah in its entirety took time.
The mother of David was Nisbeth, daughter of Abiel. The mother of Samson was Lenponit, and his sister was Nasyan. Why teach this? For answering heretics.
All right. Anyone got annoyed that there was no mention of Mrs. Manoach's name? Throughout the entire story, she is the driving force with regards to what's happening. She's the one with the kids. She's the one the angel appears to twice. She's the one who knows what's up and what to do. And yet we never hear her name, but we hear Manoach's name, even though he's a bit of a nebesh throughout the entire story. Well, now you know what her name was according to rabbinic tradition. And why did they bother teaching this, says the Talmud to itself?
Answering heretics.
Heretics. Right? So there are heretics that would challenge, say, oh yeah, you think you know the Torah so well, you think you know the Bible so well. Tell me, what was David's mom's name? What was her name? Because, I mean, if he was so important, wouldn't you guys know his name? But it's not in the Tanakh. What was Samson's mom's name? And so the rabbis had to have an answer. You got to keep it in your back pocket. It's, when people come knocking at your door, saying, I have something to share with you and good news and etc. You got to have the answer. And so one of the answers to the heretics of their generation was to know the names of lots of the women that don't get named explicitly in the Tanakh. Nowadays, there are not many people who would challenge us and say that your faith is wrong because you don't know the name of Samson's mom. But it was an important issue in their day. So it's a rather odd way that there was some gender inclusivity for a very different reason. All right, but let's move on.
And Isban had 30 sons and 30 daughters he sent abroad, and 30 daughters he brought from abroad for his sons, and he judged Israel 7 years.
All right, so who's Isban?
No idea.
The judge right before. Look at the chapter. He was the previous Shofet. He was the judge before Samson. Because chapter 12, another judge. Chapter 13 is going to be Samson. So this is the judge who was before Samson. And now, wonderful rabbinic insight.
For each one of them he made 2 wedding feasts, one in the household of the father, the other in the household of the father-in-law. But to none of them did he invite Manoah, because he said, how will that barren mule ever repay my hospitality? And all of them died in his lifetime. This is in line with what people say, in your lifetime you begot 60? What good are the 60? Marry again and get another one brighter than all 60.
All right, so it's not just a matter of quantity. If you're a bad person, you're a bad person. And it's better that a good person have 1 kid than a bad person have 60. And of course, the attitude of inviting people to the wedding feast because you will be repaid by being invited to their children's wedding feast is being held up here as an ultimate source of derision. And we don't invite people to the wedding because then they'll invite us to their simcha. We invite them because we couldn't imagine the celebration without them. Make sense? Okay, so just a little bit on the way to get to our main point.
The Midrash claims that their lack of children resulted in a quarrel between Manoah and his wife.
We can imagine this may be happening, right? Infertility has always been an issue and in many cases is a source of friction between husband and wife.
He would tell her, you are barren and cannot give birth, while she would charge him, you are sterile and therefore I did not give birth.
Right? It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. He said, she said, and without a fertility clinic, although rabbinic law says that the woman is believed when she says it's his fault or her fault, in this day and age, not everybody was following the rabbis. And so if Manoah said, no, it's you, it's not me, it would have been par for the course and certainly as perceptive as he's shown himself to be and a source of friction.
When the angel of the Lord appeared to her, he informed her, you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. The angel mentioned barrenness in order to effect domestic peace. He tells her that she is barren, and that's why she has not become pregnant.
Right. So according to Bamidbar Rabbah, the angel mentions mentions the barrenness of the mother, which she doesn't repeat to her husband. Remember how we noticed that there was missing from the message? In order to create peace between her and him, so that she will understand, actually, dear, you were the one who was barren, but don't worry, problem is solved, you're going to have a kid. That way she can be at peace, and she doesn't mention it to her husband. Why? Because now that it's done, it doesn't need to be mentioned again. And you can have shalom bayit. You can have peace between the two of them.
Wouldn't want to let him know he's right.
You wouldn't want to let him know he's right. No, well, especially not Manoah, because then he'd think he was always right. You wouldn't want to let him know he's right. And sometimes you don't need to give the I told you so room to fester either. You just need to have, we're having a kid now, it's a miracle, move on.
And he said to me, behold, you shall conceive. And that which he said to her, you are barren, she did not tell her husband, for the sake of Shalom. And she also didn't mention, no razor shall come upon his head, because this is encompassed within, for a Nazir unto God he shall be.
All right, so why didn't she mention the razor part?
It's understood.
Because it was implied. I said he was a Nazir. Of course a Nazir is not cutting his hair. That's what Nazirs do, or don't do. So, because she mentioned Nazir, that was good enough to cover the part that she skipped.
And so she also didn't mention, and he shall begin to save, for since the Philistines ruled then, she feared the matter would become known, and they would kill the child.
Why didn't she blab to her husband, oh, and he's going to be the savior from the Philistines? Because if there are any Philistines that overhear that, it's not going to go well.
And we already know Pharaoh wanted to kill all the Jewish boys when he got that.
And indeed, according to the Midrash, when Pharaoh had a prediction that there would be a savior born to the Jews, he went and killed all the boys. That's the whole putting the kids in the river thing.
It's almost like the birth of Jesus story.
Well, you know, this does predate that a little bit, but definitely the motifs, the themes are very similar. Yes. So you can see here, though, that the Malbim, one of the medieval commentators, is reading very carefully, just like we tried to do, and noticing where things match or don't match, and providing meaningful explanations for the discrepancies. To help us understand that it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an oversight, and that when the Torah chooses to add or take away from something that's being repeated, you should notice it and try to understand it.
And she added, until the day of his death, which the angel did not state explicitly, for he knew that before his death he would profane his Nazirite vow.
So one thing we didn't mention of what she added was that he will be a Nazirite until the day he dies, whereas the angel said he'll be a Nazirite from the womb. He said he'll be a Nazirite from birth, and she said he'll be a Nazirite till he dies. But the angel didn't mention till he dies. And why would the angel not mention that, says Melvin? Because he knew. He knew what kind of guy this Samson was going to be. He knew that he was not going to be the perfect Nazirite. And that by the time he died, his Nazirite vows would have been violated. Both by him as well as by others. So that the angel couldn't say something that would have been a lie. Whereas she merely assumed that her son, of course, would be perfect for all of his life, like any mother would. Okay, onward again.
Since it was revealed and known before he who spoke and the world came into being that Samson would chase after women and be punished by them, God planned that from birth and from the womb and from conception he should be kept away from this. And therefore he wished that he would be a Nazir of God, for holding back from drinking wine helps a lot for this matter. As the sages said, whoever sees a sota in her disgrace should swear as a Nazir with regards to wine.
All right, so a little digression here. Why would God make him a Nazir rather than just any other form of stricter or special rules? Because it keeps him off the sauce. And if God knew that this was going to be a man that was going to have difficulty with the ladies and in controlling his urges towards the ladies, then making him a Nazir from day one would give him the best chance possible to control those appetites, or at least direct them in constructive, if not healthy ways, for the good of the nation. Make sense? And by bringing this connection from Masechet Sota, where the rabbis say, why is Sota and the Nazir together in the same Torah portion? Because if you see a Sota, which is a woman who's suspected of adultery, you should say, phew, I'm never touching the stuff again, because look at what happened to her. Look at what happens when you get drunk and commit adultery. You end up here, or maybe adultery. And so too for Samson. Give him a fighting chance by stacking the deck as best as possible in his favor. Keep going.
And for this reason, the angel warned his mother from drinking wine or strong drink and eating anything impure, to inform about the holiness of the lad who would be born. For this is in order that they would come to raise him in holiness. And this too was the reason to guide him, such that he would be separate from the vanities of the world, from the bodily desires. And for this reason as well, he commanded that he did not pass a razor upon his head to inform as to his holiness. For all this is part of distancing from him the failing in the matter of intercourse as far as possible.
All right, so Ralbag, another very important commentator, gives us this great summary of why was Samson made a Nazir. What do we think of his explanation? Yay? Nay? Meh? See a lot of tilted heads, but don't hear a lot of words. What's that?
Sounds like it didn't work.
Sounds like it didn't work. All right, so this is the major problem with the Ralbag's line of arguing, which is he still chased after the Philistine women and still ended up being blinded and dead under the temple that he pulled down around him. Is that a success story? That's good? And so then the question then becomes, well, how bad would it have been if he hadn't have done that? Right? That's the counterfactual that we have to try and imagine. If there hadn't been these strictures and this various forms of inculcating holiness into him from birth, what would he have ended up like? And would it have been worse? Would he have been a massive brute and powerful man that had no connection to holiness whatsoever and would have not only done bad things to the Philistines, but might have done horrible things to the Israelites? But that would be implying that his strength wasn't necessarily the gift from God. And that's a little tricky, given that when you cut his hair, the strength goes away. Because he'd only be a danger if he had that strength. Otherwise, he would just be one of, unfortunately, far too many people that lose themselves in drink and women. So it's only trying to protect him if he would be a special threat that needed to be protected from. That make sense? So it's still murky. But you can see that he's working hard to try and explain why this character would have been fenced in this way when none of the other judges were. Right? Deborah, no mention of foretelling her birth and special limits to her. And Gideon, no mention of any special limits or special things that needed to be done. It's just what needed to be done. But for Samson, we get this very, very peculiar foretelling and coming, and when you read the rest of the chapters, essentially a failure. That we are at the bottom of the barrel if this is who we're choosing as leaders. Because he's never really a shofet. You know, we have the image of Devorah under the tamar, under the palm tree, sitting and judging. And it's a gorgeous image that's been captured in artistic renditions throughout the centuries of this woman who is wise and at peace and sitting under the palm and giving verdicts and helping to reconcile her people to one another and solve their problems and distresses. And anyone who's ever read the story of Samson couldn't imagine him doing anything under that tree except scratching his back with it, like Baloo the bear in Jungle Book. Right? He is not the kind of guy that's going to sit and give calm deliberations to his people. And most of his interactions with the other Israelites are rude and violent. He's not kind to his own people. He's not patient with his own people. And he certainly doesn't listen to his parents when they warn him off the Philistine women. So we have to do something to try and fix this. But it leads us back to the ultimate question, though. Who was the guy that brought the information? Because if it was a malach, if it was a pure angel, that is to say, the ultimate expression of God's will manifest in some way that we can interact with, then that raises the status of Shimshon, of Samson, to a very high level. That this is someone who was granted power and ordained through the ultimate of divine expression of desire and will, of what God really, really wanted to happen in this situation. Whereas if he was just a guy, that gives us a very different feel for God's involvement in the story and God's involvement in Samson's failings. Does that distinction make sense? So let's re-examine whether or not this was an angel or whether this was a human.
So when Manoach said, "Let us detain you,"
Remember at the very end where he says, "I'll offer you some goat"?
since he did not know if he was a prophet or an angel, he said, "If you are a prophet, then let us detain you for a feast with us. And if you are an angel, then we will prepare a kid for you as a sacrifice."
All right, so Malbim gives Manoach a little more credit and says that he was listening to his wife, and his wife said that it was an Ish Elohim, it was a man of God, which could be a euphemism for prophet, and he was like an angel, which means he could be an angel, and so he was hedging his bets and saying, "You want to stay for some goat?
Yeah.
We'll sacrifice it. That, you know, if you're just a guy, we'll do it as a dinner, and if you're an angel, we'll do it as a sacrifice." That he was hedging his bets. Keep going.
And when she said, "A man of God came unto me," because she was in doubt whether he was a man or an angel. That is to say, by virtue of his being clothed in a body, he was a man of God. By virtue of his awesomeness, he was like an angel.
Which doesn't really clarify, right? Malbim is still reading this very conflicted. That he could have been a person, he could have been an angel, could have been a person, could have been an angel. And indeed, many stories in the Tanakh can be read in both ways. That someone can be a malach of God, meaning a representative, a messenger from God, without being physically or non-corporeally what we would consider to be an angel. And someone can be an actual angel in all that means theologically, but appear as a man. And so we get this ambiguity. And Malbim seems to be comfortable with that ambiguity. Ralbag, on the other hand, our other major commentator for today, he wants an answer. And he's going to tell you what he thinks it was.
"Behold, this Malach, who spoke to Manoach and his wife, was certainly a prophet. For it is not of the way of prophecy that it addresses two in this manner mentioned in this passage. I think that this prophet was Pinchas."
Remember, there's a midrash, a tradition that Pinchas, that's the guy with the spear, the kid of Aaron, that killed Zimri and what's that? And thank you. Lived a very long time, and that he would have appeared here would fit that midrash just fine. So we have Pinchas, coming to Lady Manoach and giving her the news. That's Relbag's take.
He did not wish to eat of the goat, just as he did not wish to eat of the meat and matzah which Gideon brought before him, so that it would settle more in the hearts of Manoach and his wife that he was a malach of God, so that they would be careful of all that he said to them. And behold, the malach ascended in the flame of the altar, just as in the way that had happened with Gideon. Also for this reason, the prophet did not wish to reveal his name, for at that time they did not believe very much in prophets, for the word of God was rare then. In order to increase their faith in his words, he concealed from them who he was.
All right, so what's Relbag's final point here with these various proofs that he's bringing from parallels with the story of Gideon and what's happening? Why didn't he want to eat the goat? Was it because he was an angel and he couldn't eat? No, because if you sit down and eat with the people after you've just given this momentous prophecy to them, it strips something of the awesomeness of the experience from it. You know, it's like you never take your date to have fried chicken for the first time, because when a person sees you sitting there, it's just not your best, most attractive presentation, right? If you're slurping your spaghetti noodles in and it's dripping everywhere, it takes away a little bit of the awesomeness of that experience. Does that make sense? And Relbag is saying, if he sat down and ate with them, he wouldn't be a prophet of God. He wouldn't be this messenger, this representative, this malach. He would be the guy we had dinner with. And that gives him too much humanity, says Relbag, that for the people of that generation to take the words seriously, given how little people felt God in their lives, they needed to be impressed by the awesomeness of the messenger, even if that messenger was just a guy. They needed to have it drummed into them that this was the most amazing experience of their lives. And therefore, every word that they were told of what to do had to be made very, very dramatic and then poof, vanish in a flame so that they would be completely sealed in their memory. This was something that they would follow through with.
Is there any theory or belief that the angel of God is actually God?
That it was actually God? No. Usually the term malach generally does refer to being not God. But one theory that has been advanced is that this is reinforced a little bit by the fact that they always refer to him as malach or ish Elohim, which Elohim is a generic word, or can be a generic word, not just for God, but for lowercase g, gods. That it was, it's some religious guy, some guru came by and told me this. Whereas the narration is very clear that this is from Adonai, which is an undeniable and non-ambiguous term exclusively for the God of Israel. So it could have been that Manoach and his lady were not necessarily the most devout, most spiritually aware, and amazingly devoted exclusively to God type of people. They might have had a little shrine to this god, or a little idol over here, or a little fetish there, and fetish in the religious sense, and, exclusive to God. It wasn't common during this day. Archaeology tells us that categorically, as well as our traditions. Most people were also a little idolatrous on the side, sometimes in the center. And perhaps the Navi, the prophet, this human malach knew that something special was happening to this family and that their son would be needed to help defend the people. And by God, literally, he needed to stack the deck in the kid and the nation's favor to make sure that a child coming from this family at this time when God was so distant, or people had distanced themselves so much from God, that it would be as close as possible by making him almost neurotic about holiness, so that at least his power could be used for good.
But then what happened with Gideon? Because this malach ascends in a flame, they can see going up. And I don't remember what Gideon had.
Go back and read chapter 6 in the book of Judges. By the way, if you've never read all the book of Judges, it is not it's not a long book. It's very short from the Tanakh. Go and read it. It is an amazing collection of the tales of different models of leadership and different models of success and failures of our people. And it really explains how it is we got from being the happy people who had just crossed the Jordan into the land of Israel, who conquered Jericho, who settled the land, and ended up being in complete and horrible state by the time King David needs to come and pull it all together. The book of Judges is a remarkable text on the failings of human leadership or lack of leadership. And Samson really fits in very powerfully as a strong figure in that whole pattern. So read chapter 6 and see exactly how the angel interacts with Gideon there, and see that the interaction with the people, between the people and God during this Judges period is iffy. We have a few bright stars, but for the most part it gets worse and worse as the different successive judges come through. And this is, I think, kind of what's being taught here. They couldn't even recognize this guy as being a true prophet well enough to then listen to his words. They had to almost have the magic light show in order to be convinced of anything. Because after all, that's what was playing down the street at the pagan theater. You know, that's where they did all the light and the incense and the fancy special effects to try and convince people of their gods. And it's the image of a prophet almost playing those games to try and get the best possible outcome from this situation is a very powerful one, a very poignant one, and a very good reminder of how far we've come, that we don't hopefully need someone to throw around fireballs to make us believe that when they say we should be righteous. And we'll leave it at that.